Bizarre Brain Comics.
Hello, my comic book friends, and welcome to Bizarre Brain Comics. I am Gary, your host. This is where I like to take a look at some older comics, talk a little bit about the characters and creators, and examine the stories and the art. And this time I want to take a look at this book, All-Star Squadron #2 from DC Comics. This is from 1981. And it has this great Joe Kubert cover. And with All-Star Squadron has Hawkman as one of the members in it. And Joe Kubert, of course, has played a role in both the Golden Age Hawkman and some of the Silver Age Hawkman. And then, of course, he was one of the major artists at DC for the war comics for decades. So this particular cover is right up his alley, where it has the Hawkman and the other All-Stars taking on Nazi Stuka in the air. So it's great, but it's misleading. Now it's intended to be illustrative of the whole concept and and as well as the future of the All-Stars. But it is misleading because it does show this plane and others which are taking off from an aircraft carrier. And but in the story, there are no Germans in it, and they're definitely not German aircraft. They happen to be Japanese aircraft that are involved. But I think the German aircraft is more eye-catching, especially with this Stuka, that beautiful gull wing design. And I've babbled long enough about that. Before we take a little closer examination here, I want to remind you my first comic book is out, Bizarre Brain Comics Anthology. And I want to thank all those out there who have told me, and those who haven't told me as well, who have already ordered their copies. It's has adventures, humor, and single-page gags. And it's available on Amazon. Just type in Bizarre Brain Comics, and it will come right up, and you can have your copy for $7.99. And now here we go. DC Comics All-Star Squadron #2, 1982, written by Roy Thomas, with pencils by Rich Buckler and inks by Jerry Ordway. All three great creators. Of course, Roy Thomas, big writer for Marvel and then later DC. Did a lot of stuff for the Avengers and the like, but it's probably most closely associated with the Conan the Barbarian, which he wrote on many years, off and on for decades. And of course, I've talked about Rich Buckler before, a fine artist, but I don't think I've ever talked about Jerry Ordway before, and I'm not going to this time either, because he does the inks. But he, you can see his style coming through at times on top of Rich Buckler's pencils, but he later did art for the All-Star Squadron, and I think for JSA, and pencils, and of course for several years he did some great work on one of the Superman titles. And the All-Star Squadron is a superhero team published by DC Comics, which debuted in Justice League of America number 193 in 1981. I guess it was a preview. And it was created by Roy Thomas, Rich Buckler, and Jerry Ordway. And the team was composed of Golden Age mystery men. Not all of them were owned by DC during the Golden Age, but they are properties that were acquired later, and then they were backfit to fit these retconned to fit in their continuity. And these mystery men, they prosecuted the fight against the Axis powers in World War II. And the team got their name from All-Star Comics, the classic title which featured many Golden Age characters and in which the Justice Society of America debuted. And the JSA was the first super team in comics. And this particular series ran from 1981 to 1987. And I tell you, there's a lot of stuff going on in this book. But it's one that, is it a superhero book? Is it a war book? Well, it's a combination of it. It is definitely a superhero book. And it is also definitely a war book because it's placed during the war, and it's fighting... They're fighting primarily war-oriented villains. Let's take a look. All-Star Squadron number 2. Now, issue 1, which I don't have, but from the context of the story, you find out that this takes place on December 7th, 1941. This entire issue, and apparently all or most of issue 1 did as well. In issue 1, the Justice Society of America disappeared. They were up against not all of them, 3 members remained, and they're part of this team now. They disappeared for a time. They were incapacitated by the villainous Per Degaton, who will be our primary villain here. And of course, and meanwhile, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So we start off with our heroes coming out of rushing out of the White House, and people are calling them the Justice Society, and they're rushing to. They don't know that they're a new group called All Stars yet. Anyway, while they're on their way to catch a plane to take them to the West Coast, they come across some gangster activity. It gives us a good introduction to many of the characters, their powers. Let's each one shine just a little bit. There are many of them: Johnny Quick, Hawkman, the Golden Age Hawkman, the original Adam, Liberty Bell, Dr. Midnight, and if there's anybody else offhand, I can't tell. Well, they get to the plane, and of course Hawkman is a qualified pilot, and so he flies them in a bomber heading for the West Coast. While they're got hours to go, because all this is because the government is afraid that the Japanese might have another sneak attack against the American mainland, and en route, they decide to share their secret identities and their respective origins. This is all, of course, for to reveal everyone. Robot Man, that's the one I forgot. Who so they get to know each other, and it's to inform the audience, the readers, who might not be familiar with these characters. So just as they're getting there, just off San Francisco, here we see something real unusual. It seems kind of silly, but it does kind of make sense later. There is an aircraft carrier submerged, launching aircraft, and they take off. And it is the villain Per Degaton. It turns out he is a time traveler from the near future. He reveals he's got a Silent Knight and someone else are captured prisoners, and and he's got other villains who are his allies. And also from the future, which he brought back from the future. It turns out he is a time traveler. Reveals his plan, gives his own origin, where he had once gone back in time, conquered the world, and yet, and this is drawn from a classic period Justice Society story, and how they defeated him. Then when everything snapped back, so no one remembered any of it, including him. So he went finally remembered, went to the future, but he could only go a few decades into the future. But he learned about advanced technology and the history. He takes because he's from 1947 here, and sets up this plan. The idea is to, again, still take over the world, force the Americans to focus on the Japanese and not the war in Europe, and to eventually for all parties to come to a stalemate, setting everything up for him. In the process, the Silent Knight gets free, kind of fights Solomon Grundy. Meanwhile, there's this attack on the on San Francisco, and then another future member pops up because she happens to be there, who is the Phantom Lady. Oh, that's the one I was looking for. Phantom Lady. And there's other gangsters, the ones who can take on the planes. There are Japanese pilots snipped out of time and then hypnotized artificially, and so that they're basically drones, and they're taking out those planes. But Robot Man, Johnny Quick, Hawkman, while the others are on the ground. But then so because of this, Per Degaton says, it's kind of spoiling his plans a little bit. So he decides to go ahead and detonate the bombs on the island where the Justice Society are being held prisoner. Dun dun dun. And then on the last page here is just a fact file telling you all about Per Degaton. That's a really cool drawing of the character. He is a cool looking villainous character. And that's what I've got for you this time with the All-Star Squadron. That's a lot of fun reading. I've recently got some other issues, and I'm going to have to read them as well. And one or two I might do videos on in the future, just because I might like the characters involved. So that is it. Please like, share, subscribe, and do leave a comment. Did you like the All-Star Squadron? Do you like the Justice Society? Oh, I also forgot to mention that all this takes place, of course, in the prior to the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then everything changed. but this is on Earth 2. That's what I meant to mention. We're on Earth 2. So do leave comments. Please leave comments. I enjoy reading them. And thank you for joining me. And remember, comics are art, especially when it's done by Joe Kubert.